Hey, Divine Ones, it's Jerome Braggs again, and I want to come to you on this beautiful Sunday to do a short live for you. I kind of missed being able to go live for you last week. I had an out of town guest, and I was preparing to do my first sessions of my soul circles. So that week was a little full, and the timing of everything didn't actually work out for me to do a live for you last Tuesday. So I'm going to do two this week, one today, and then I'm going to come and do that another live for you on Tuesday. And today I wanted to share with you a little bit about what trauma actually is to our soul from the perspective of our soul. There are several definitions of trauma from the Western standpoint, and our soul has a very different definition. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I talk about unhealed trauma as the root cause of most of the illnesses and diseases in our bodies, as well as the dysfunctions we experience, dysfunctions and disorders that we manifest in our personal lives, right? So unhealed trauma is usually at the root of all of that. And I want to kind of share what that is, like what I actually mean by unhealed trauma. So in the Western lexicon, our definition of trauma is very different. Usually we define trauma as some type of tragic or horrific event that happens to us, like a car accident or a loss of limbs or a loss of a loved one or some type of abuse or violence against our bodies or our person some type of way. And that particular event, that type of tragic event, has caused us to feel a different way about ourselves than we felt before. And that if we feel a different way, we feel kind of less than about ourselves than we used to feel. And we never recover from that. That's kind of what they mean by trauma, is that we don't recover from that kind of what that event and how that event made us feel. The soul's perspective, however, is a little bit different. There's some similarities there, but it's a little bit different. Instead of the actual event itself being the trauma, from the soul's perspective, the trauma is actually how that event made us feel about ourselves, particularly that it disconnected us, like whether it was the loss of a loved one, whether it was some type of abuse that happened to us, whether it was a loss of a limb or some horrific accident, or even an illness or disease. It doesn't matter. It could even be just something someone said to us or some type of experience that we had, and it wasn't necessarily tragic or horrific. The trauma that is actually horrific is what that particular experience made us believe about ourselves. It made us believe about ourselves somehow that we're not worthy, that we're not lovable, that we're not safe. The trauma actually is that we began to believe we began to be more afraid, and we began to disconnect from the truth of who we really are somehow. So that truth is meaning that we're lovable, that all of our being is worthy, that we are a safe being in the world, and it is safe to be fully who we are in the world, some type of way, like it's safe to be our full selves in the world. But somehow that event made us believe that that's not true, that we're not safe to be ourselves somehow, that we're not safe, our being is not safe in the world, that we're not whole, that we're not lovable, that we're not enough, that there's something wrong with us, and that it's not safe. And so that's really, to the soul, the trauma is that we began to believe that there's something wrong with us somehow, and that we're not safe somehow. Because that particular belief is in total opposition to what our soul knows about us, to the truth of who we really are as a cosmic eternal being, as an expression of God. That is totally different than who we really are and what our soul knows about us and how it feels about us. And so we begin to disconnect from the truth of ourselves. And that belief also causes us to disconnect from the frequency or the vibration of who we really are. And that's the real trauma. The Greek word, trauma comes from the Greek word, and the root word of the word trauma actually means wound. And that's the real wound. That's the wound. The belief that something is wrong with us and the belief that we're not safe somehow is the wound, is how we get wounded. And that wound continues to bleed out all over every area of our lives. It affects the things we manifest for ourselves in our lives. It gets filtered through that. So everything we manifest through our lives gets kind of filtered through that belief system, gets filtered through that vibration of feeling not enough and not safe. And when we hold that trauma in our bodies and in our consciousness without actually healing it, what ends up happening for a long time, if we hold it for a very long time, then that's when the illnesses and diseases begin to show up in our bodies, because they are literally just a reflection and a manifestation of the fear we're holding that we're not safe somehow, and the fear we're holding that there's something wrong with us, right? And so this is why understanding your trauma and understanding the trauma you're holding within you is very important. And realizing from the soul's perspective is not the particular event that happened. It wasn't that you may have been raped or you may have been abused as a child or as an adult. It wasn't that you lost a limb or you lost a loved one, or it wasn't, whatever the particular experience or the event was, that's not actually the trauma to the soul. The trauma is how that event made you feel about yourself and what it made you believe about yourself. That's the trauma. Because if that event had happened, and there are many of us in the world where this actually, that this particular phenomenon happens that I'm going to explain, is had that event actually happened, but it didn't change how you felt about yourself, that you still believed you were lovable, you still believed you were safe, you didn't believe that there was anything wrong with you because this happened. It didn't shift your vibration or your belief in yourself downwards, right? It just either your belief stayed the same or somehow it went up. Then you wouldn't have been traumatized at all from that event, and that event would not have negatively affected your life. It would have sucked. That experience would have sucked, and it may have been painful, and it may not have been a very blissful experience, but it wouldn't have traumatized you because it wouldn't have shifted how your consciousness or your vibration, how you feel about yourself and how you think about yourself. If it didn't shift that downwards, then it wasn't a traumatizing event. And again, it wasn't the event itself, because a lot of times a lot of us think, well, since I haven't been raped or I haven't experienced this loss or dramatic loss in my life or something like that, that I don't have any trauma. And that's not true. If you have a belief inside of you, no matter where you got it from, no matter how it could have come from somebody teasing you on the playground as a kid. It could have come from something your mother said about your weight when you were younger. It doesn't matter. If there was something that happened that and I keep wiping my nose, you guys. I just kind of got out of the shower, and I guess the water is coming. So I don't want it to look like I'm having some kind of nasal drippage here, but that's not what's going on. But I guess I didn't fully dry off, and it keeps showing up on my mustache and under my nose. But anyway, the trauma is not, again, the event, and it doesn't matter how it came. Some of our traumas come through very tragic and horrific circumstances. And some of us come from very kind of mundane events, but they end up having a very tragic and horrific response, which is the fact that you don't believe that you're enough fully somehow, and that you don't believe anymore that you're safe somehow, which we all believe when we're kids, when we're children. We come in with the understanding that we are enough, no matter what we look like, no matter who we are or what we have or don't have. We understand that we're whole and that we're enough, and we have an understanding of being safe. But we get socialized some type of way through the events that happen to us into believing, and this socialization becomes traumatizing when it makes us believe that there's something wrong with us and that we're not safe somehow. So that's really what trauma is from the soul's perspective. Again, it's not the event that happened to you, it's what that event made you believe about yourself and how it made you feel about yourself, and that it made you reduce and diminish how you feel from being worthy and whole and safe and enough and lovable into somehow believing that something's wrong with you. It could either be how you look, or your personality, or your level of intellect, or what you have or don't have, or it could be that something you can believe something about that is wrong with you, or you could believe somehow that it's not safe. Somehow it's not safe to be the fullness of yourself. It's not safe to be how you look. It's not safe to express how you think. It's not safe, to be whatever personality characteristic you have, or your sexuality, or anything like that, right? So you believe that somehow in the world, something that you're not safe and that something's wrong with you. And that's trauma. That's the wound that is calling to be healed. And until we heal that aspect of us that thinks there's something wrong and thinks we're not safe, then that continues to be manifested in our life, through our life experiences, through our relationships, through the events that happen. And eventually, if we carry it long enough and that trauma wells up strong enough and goes unhealed long enough, then it begins to be manifested in our body as some type of illness or disease. And if you've been following me, I say that disease is not a punishment or a betrayal by your body. It's not saying that you've done something wrong, or that your body is betraying you and it's just breaking down on its own without anything happening, without any reason. It's actually just a reflection of the how you feel about yourself and how you think about yourself. Basically, the internal wounds that you've been holding that have gone unhealed for a while, and it's an invitation to heal. So that's what trauma is, you guys, from our soul's perspective. That's how it views it. And that's what's actually being called to heal when we look at trauma. So whatever modality you use to try to heal your trauma, understand what you're actually trying to heal. You're actually trying to heal the belief in you, or the beliefs in you that say there's something wrong with you. And you're trying to heal the beliefs in you, the fear-based beliefs in you that say you're not safe somehow, however that manifests for you. For me, my trauma, if you've been following me, as I healed from two terminal diseases, the traumas that were at the core of those diseases was the belief for me that something was wrong with my sexuality, being same gender loving, as well as something was wrong with me as far as that I was an intuitive and I was psychic, that I was raised in a very Christian culture and a very Christian upbringing. And that made me feel like there was something unholy about me, and that people were going to judge me and reject me if they knew that, I could see things that other people couldn't see, and that I could see and communicate with people on the other side, and that I had a bigger understanding of what God was. That made me feel like something was wrong with me, because that was not okay in my culture. Something was not okay with me, right? And that it wasn't safe for me to be and to share that, right? So I would hide it and I suppressed it, which is highly detrimental to my being. And the same thing went with my sexuality. I would hide it and suppress it because, my belief was something was wrong with it. And if they found out, then they'd reject me and they withhold love from me, and I wouldn't belong anymore. And those beliefs and the suppression of my being was the very cause of the illnesses that came. When I went through my near-death experience, that's what I understood was the very cause. It was the root cause of why the illnesses showed up. It wasn't what I was eating. It wasn't what I wasn't eating. It wasn't that I wasn't exercising. It was that I had this unhealed trauma within me that had really hijacked my internal state of being, my vibration. And my body couldn't be well while I held that vibration and I held those traumas within me. So I hope this helped you guys. I'm going to share a lot more about this later, but I just wanted to come and talk about what trauma actually is to the soul and why it's detrimental a little bit, and why it's important that we heal it and be aware of what the trauma actually is. I'm going to come back on Tuesday and talk a little bit more about this and go in a little bit of depth to talk about what it actually means for your life, and what the real call of healing really is about. So I just hope this helps you a little bit, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Enjoy this beautiful Sunday. Take care of yourself. And as always, I love you. I see the best in you, and I want the best for you. Bye.